It all started with a flicker, just a tiny, almost invisible blip on a screen deep inside a monitoring station buried under the ice of Antarctica. The station was old, built back when people still argued about whether space junk was a real problem. Its job was simple: watch the sky, track asteroids, and make sure nothing big was heading for Earth. But one Tuesday morning, the sensors picked up something strange. Not an asteroid, not a comet, not even a satellite gone rogue. It was a flash, short, sharp, and impossibly fast, coming from somewhere near the orbit of Jupiter. At first, nobody paid much attention. Glitches happened. Solar flares, cosmic rays, even a loose wire could trick the system. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, the signal came from a different part of the outer solar system. Always brief, always clean. Like something had fired a bullet across millions of kilometers of empty space and left no trail but a whisper of energy. Scientists compared notes. Engineers ran diagnostics. Nothing was broken. The data was real, but what could cause it? There were no human ships out that far, just a few automated probes, long silent, drifting like ghosts. And yet something was moving. Something fast. Too fast. Meanwhile, on the moon, a routine geological survey turned up something odd. Tiny craters, smaller than a fingernail, pocked the surface in places that hadn't been touched in billions of years. The edges were melted, fused as if hit by something traveling at insane speeds. Back on Earth, analysts cross-referenced the timing. The lunar impacts matched the sensor blips almost exactly. It wasn't coincidence. It was correlation. People started talking quietly, not in public, not on the news, but in secure video calls, in dimly lit conference rooms, in encrypted messages passed between defense ministries and space agencies. Someone, somewhere, was testing weapons. Not lasers, not missiles, something older, simpler, and far more terrifying in its raw physics. Railguns. Railguns weren't new. The idea had been around for over a century, using powerful electromagnets to shoot metal slugs at speeds that made bullets look slow. On Earth, prototypes had been built, tested, shelved. Too expensive, too power-hungry. But in space? No air resistance. No gravity drag. A tungsten rod fired from orbit could cross the distance from Earth to Mars in hours, hitting with the force of a small nuke, without a single drop of fuel or a speck of radiation. And now, it seemed someone had finally made it work. Not just work, deployed it, but who and why. The truth was, it was Earth itself. Not one country, not one corporation, but a quiet global effort born out of desperation. After the last great climate collapse and the near-miss asteroid scare of 2087, the world's major powers had done something unprecedented. They'd stopped arguing long enough to build a defense system together. Hidden in plain sight, on old space stations, repurposed mining platforms, even disguised as solar observatories, they'd installed railgun arrays. Silent, invisible, waiting. The leadership knew how it would look to anyone watching from the stars. Like aggression, like madness. So they stayed silent. No announcements, no tests broadcast to the public, just cold, calculated readiness. They told themselves it was only for protection, that they'd never fire unless attacked. But deep down, they also knew if the galaxy was watching, it would misunderstand. And if it wasn't watching, well, maybe that was even worse. Because out there in the black between stars, someone was watching. A small, unmarked vessel, no bigger than a city bus, drifted past the edge of the solar system. It belonged to a species that had mapped thousands of worlds, cataloged countless civilizations. They called themselves observers, not conquerors. Their mission was peaceful: record, analyze, report. When their long-range sensors caught the same energy spikes Earth stations had detected, their onboard AI flagged it as anomalous kinetic activity. The crew reviewed the data, saw the lunar craters, traced the trajectories, but their conclusion? Natural phenomenon. Maybe a new type of micrometeor shower, or magnetic interactions in Jupiter's radiation belts. After all, the species in Sol system hadn't even left their home planet in significant numbers. Their radio signals were still messy, chaotic, full of music, arguments, and old TV shows. They hadn't cracked faster than light travel. Their energy signature was weak, scattered. Clearly they were still in their infancy, so the report was filed. Labeled low priority, archived. Back on Earth, no one knew they'd been seen. No one knew their secret was already drifting through alien databases, dismissed with a digital shrug. Life went on. Kids went to school. Farmers grew food in vertical towers. Engineers kept upgrading the railgun network, making it faster, smarter, deadlier, and the world held its breath, hoping they'd never have to use it. But hope doesn't stop threats. It only delays them. Years later, when the first alien ships crossed into the outer solar system, not as observers, but as invaders, the people of Earth would look back at this quiet time and realize this was the moment everything changed. Not with a bang, not with a declaration of war, but with a few silent blips on a frozen screen, and a handful of melted craters on the moon. The galaxy had been given a warning, clear, repeated, undeniable, and it had chosen to ignore it. Because how could a species that still argued over borders, still burned fossil fuels in some corners, still sent fragile rockets into orbit like paper boats on a stormy sea, how could they possibly wield the power to shake the stars? That was the mistake. The fatal galaxy-sized mistake. And it all began with a flicker so small, so easy to miss that almost no one saw it coming. Years passed. The strange flashes near Jupiter faded from headlines, mostly because they'd never made headlines to begin with. On Earth, life rolled on. Cities grew taller, oceans rose slower thanks to new tech, and people argued about the same old things: fairness, freedom, the future. But out in the dark, beyond Mars, beyond the asteroid belt, whispers began to spread. Not human whispers. Alien ones. Deep space traders, those who hopped from system to system in patched-up freighters, started telling stories. They spoke of a quiet star system where something odd had happened. A group of raiders known for hijacking mining drones near the outer ice worlds had vanished. Not disabled. Not captured. Gone. One moment their ship was broadcasting a taunting message. The next, silence. Then, a debris field so fine it looked like glitter in the scanner. At first, no one believed it. Pirates disappeared all the time, usually because they crossed the wrong warlord. But then another story surfaced. A lone scout vessel, mapping comets near Saturn, reported seeing a streak of light faster than any missile. It didn't explode, it just hit clean final. The scout barely escaped, its hull scorched by the shock wave of vaporized metal. These tales drifted through spaceports and orbital markets, passed over mugs of synthetic brew or during engine repairs in zero-G bays. Most dismissed them as tall tales, space folklore like ghost ships or black holes that sang lullabies. After all, the system in question, Sol, was known to be home to a young species, barely spacefaring, still using chemical rockets for most launches. Their broadcasts were full of drama shows, cooking contests, and political shouting matches. Hardly the profile of a civilization that could wipe out a warship in seconds, but not everyone laughed. A small group within the Galactic Concord, the loose alliance of older, more established species, started paying attention. They pulled old sensor logs, cross-referenced trader reports, even dug up that dusty file from the Qatari observer vessel that had passed through Seoul years ago. And slowly a pattern emerged. Too many accidents, too many clean impacts. Too much silence where there should have been noise. One analyst working late in a dim archive orbiting a quiet blue planet reran the data. He slowed the energy signatures down, matched them to known weapon profiles. What he found chilled him. The impacts weren't from plasma cannons or fusion warheads. They were kinetic. Pure brutal physics. Something was launching solid metal at a fraction of light speed. No explosion needed. Just mass and velocity. And the terrifying math that turned a simple rod of tungsten into a planet cracker. He wrote a report. Urgent, clear, full of warnings. But when it reached the higher councils, it got lost in the noise. You see, the Concord wasn't used to taking threats seriously from pre-warp species. Their whole philosophy was built on the idea that real power came with maturity, mastery of energy, control of space-time, peaceful coexistence. A species still burning oil in some places, still arguing over land and language, they couldn't possibly be dangerous. Dangerous civilizations either destroyed themselves quickly or grew up fast. Earth had done neither, so they assumed it was harmless. Besides, the data was messy. No clear video. No official declaration, just rumors and fragments. And in galactic politics, rumors weren't enough to justify action, especially not against a system that Hadn't even asked to join the Conquered yet, so the report was filed under low probability, high speculation. A polite way of saying probably nonsense. Back on Earth, no one knew their secret was being debated in council chambers light years away. But they did know they were being watched. Not by aliens yet, but by each other. Nations still didn't fully trust one another, even after decades of cooperation in space. So the Railgun network remained hidden. Its control split between multiple command centers, its existence known only to a few hundred people worldwide. Then came the incident near Mars. A group of rogue miners, technically independent, but really just armed gangs with drills, had taken over a water-rich asteroid. They started demanding tolls from supply ships heading to the Martian colonies. When Earth's orbital authority sent a warning, they laughed, sent back a crude message full of threats. 2 hours later, a single railgun slug, no bigger than a telephone pole, left a platform hidden in the shadow of Phobos. It crossed 8,000 kilometers in under a minute, hit the pirate ship dead center. The vessel didn't explode. It disintegrated. One moment it was there, broadcasting music and taunts. The next, it was a cloud of superheated gas expanding into the void. The message was clear: no warning shots, no negotiations. Just consequence. News of the strike spread fast, among humans at least. Officially, Earth called it a defensive kinetic intercept. Unofficially, people whispered they finally used it. But the real audience wasn't on Earth. A Xyloth trade monitor, passing through the system on a routine scan, caught the entire event on long-range sensors. The speed, the precision, the total lack of energy signature before impact. It defied everything they knew about primitive weapons. Back at Concord headquarters, the data landed on the same analyst's desk. He stared at it for a long time. Then he sent a new message, this time marked urgent, eyes only. But again, it was too quiet. Too clean. Too human. They don't even have artificial gravity on most of their ships, someone said during a council meeting. How could they build something like this? They must have stolen the tech, another suggested, or gotten lucky with a one-time prototype. No one considered the truth, that humans hadn't needed fancy energy weapons or warp drives to become dangerous. They'd gone back to basics, Newton's laws, raw momentum, and the cold truth that in space even a pebble can kill if it's moving fast enough. And so the warnings kept coming. And kept being ignored, because it's hard to fear a species that still sends birthday cards, still cries at movies, still plants gardens on rooftops while the world changes around them. It's easy to assume that if they haven't reached the stars with grace, they must be harmless. But Earth wasn't trying to impress the galaxy. It was trying to survive, and survival sometimes looks a lot like silence until it doesn't. The traders kept talking. The analysts kept filing reports. The councils kept shrugging. And out in the Sol system, the railgun platform stayed dark, cold, and ready. No one realized it then, but the galaxy was building its own coffin, one dismissed report at a time. Tension had been building for years, but no one expected it to snap where it did, out near the edge of the solar system, in the icy dark where comets drifted like frozen memories. A new power had arrived, the Warnin Collective. They weren't explorers or traders, they were conquerors. And they'd set their sights on the Oort cloud, the distant shell of ice and rock that surrounded the sun like a ghostly halo. To them, it wasn't sacred. It wasn't even empty. It was a resource field, rich in deuterium, the fuel that powered half the warships in the galaxy. Without warning, without asking, they moved in. Their ships, sleek, armored, bristling with plasma cannons, began harvesting comets, melting them down, loading the ice onto massive haulers. They didn't care that this was human space. Earth hadn't claimed it with flags or stations, so in the Vorn's eyes it was free for the taking. After all, what could a planet-bound species do about it? Send a protest email? At first, Earth tried diplomacy. Messages were sent, calm, clear, firm. This region is under the jurisdiction of the United Earth Defense Council. Cease operations immediately. The Vorn didn't even reply. Instead, they sent a single broadcast across all frequencies. A looping image of their flagship crushing a small comet into dust, set to the sound of deep, rumbling drums. It wasn't just a message. It was a dare. Back on Earth, silence fell over the command centers. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of decision. For decades, the Railgun network had existed only as a last resort, A ghost in the machine never meant to be seen. But now the choice was stark. Back down and lose not just resources, but respect. Or show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of. They chose to show. Operation Iron Judgment wasn't flashy. There were no countdowns broadcast to the public, no dramatic speeches, just 3 quiet commands sent from hidden control bunkers buried under mountains and ice. And then, action. From platforms near Neptune, cloaked in thermal blankets and disguised as old scientific outposts, 3 railgun batteries powered up. Their barrels, kilometers long, hummed with stored energy. Inside each, a dense tungsten slug. No explosives, no guidance system, waited. It didn't need either. Physics would do the rest. At precisely 03:17 Earth time, they fired. The slug shot into the void at over 3% the speed of light. No flames, no sound. Just pure silent momentum. They crossed the outer solar system in minutes, guided only by predictive algorithms that accounted for gravity, drift, and the Vorn fleet's likely movements. The Vorn never saw them coming. One moment, their command ship was broadcasting victory chants. The next, it simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a kinetic impact so violent it lit up sensors across 3 star systems. 2 escort cruisers vanished seconds later, torn apart by shockwaves they couldn't shield against. Plasma shields useless. Armor plating? Like tissue paper. In space, there's no shock absorption, just raw, unrelenting force-meeting matter. Within 18 minutes, the entire Vorn task force was gone. Not disabled, not damaged, erased. Only expanding clouds of hot metal and frozen gas remained, glowing faintly in the infrared. On Earth, people didn't cheer. There were no parades. Most didn't even know what had happened. But in the corridors of power, a quiet understanding settled in. The age of hiding was over. The Vorn, however, didn't stay quiet. Survivors, those on support ships far behind the front line, sent panicked distress calls across the galactic comms net. Their message was simple. They killed us with rocks. Just rocks. Moving too fast to see. That phrase, killed us with rocks, spread like wildfire. For the first time, the Galactic Concord took real notice. This wasn't a rumor or a blurry sensor reading. This was a full military force, wiped out in minutes by a species that hadn't even mastered faster-than-light travel. Analysts re-examined every old report. Traitors were questioned. The Kitari Observer's archived file was pulled up again, this time with fresh eyes. And now, the truth was undeniable. But instead of seeing it as self-defense, many in the Concord saw something else, barbarism. They used kinetic weapons like clubs, one elder delegate said during an emergency session. No finesse, no warning. Just annihilation. Another called it the rage of children playing with God's tools. Fear twisted into judgment. Judgment hardened into policy. Earth's attempts to explain, through official channels, through peaceful overtures, were ignored. The Conquered didn't want excuses. They wanted control. And since Earth hadn't asked for membership, hadn't followed the proper path of cultural and technological maturity, they were now labeled unstable, dangerous, unpredictable. Worse, the Vorn used the attack as proof that humanity was a threat to galactic order. They began rallying allies, spinning the story. If they'll do this to us, what will they do to you? Back on Earth, people watched the stars and wondered why the galaxy seemed to hate them more now that they'd defended themselves. Kids in schools asked teachers, why don't they understand we only fired because they invaded? Engineers working on solar farms muttered, we didn't want this. We just wanted to be left alone. But the universe doesn't care about intentions. It only sees actions. And humanity's action, clean, precise, devastating, had shattered the illusion of their weakness. Now the galaxy saw them clearly, and what it saw scared it. Not because humans had railguns, but because they were willing to use them. The message Earth had hoped to send, we are not helpless, had been received. But it had been twisted into something darker. They are ruthless. Diplomats pleaded for dialogue. Scientists offered data. Even artists sent music and poetry into deep space, hoping to show the softer side of humanity. But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, especially when the other side is already preparing for war. And so, while Earth tried to reach out, the galaxy began to close in. The Conquered imposed a blockade. No alien ships would trade with Sol. No data streams would be shared. Earth was cut off not with violence but with silence. A cosmic quarantine. It was meant to humble them, to force them to grow up before rejoining the galactic community. But isolation doesn't always soften a people. Sometimes it hardens them. And as the months passed, Earth didn't dismantle its railgun network. It expanded it, built more platforms, refined the targeting, prepared, not for conquest but for survival, because they finally understood the galaxy wouldn't respect peace. It only respected power, and if power looked like a silent slug screaming through the dark at impossible speed, then so be it. The Vorn were regrouping. The Conquered was watching. And Earth? Earth was waiting, not for war, but for the moment the galaxy would finally stop underestimating them. That moment they knew was coming. And when it did, they wouldn't need to explain themselves again. The sky would speak for them. After the blockade began, Earth didn't collapse. It didn't panic. Instead, something quiet and stubborn took root, like a seed pushing through concrete. Cut off from alien tech, from shared knowledge, from the galactic data streams that once helped predict solar storms or map safe travel lanes, humanity turned inward, not in fear but in focus. Cities didn't fall silent. Factories didn't shut down. If anything, they worked harder. Engineers who once dreamed of warp drives now perfected magnetic coils. Farmers in orbital greenhouses doubled crop yields using recycled air and sunlight. Kids in schools studied orbital mechanics not as theory but as survival skill. The message was unspoken but clear. If the galaxy won't let us in, we'll build our own world and protect it. But it wasn't easy. The blockade hurt. Medical supplies that once came from off-world labs had to be recreated from scratch. Rare minerals used in advanced electronics became precious. Some people grew angry. Why should we play by their rules when they never gave us a seat at the table? Others whispered in markets and mess halls. But anger didn't win wars. Preparation did. And so, while the rest of the galaxy assumed Earth was crumbling in isolation, the opposite was happening. The Railgun network, once a secret emergency system, became the backbone of a new kind of defense. Hidden in the asteroid belt, buried under the ice of Europa, even tucked into the shadowed craters of Mercury, new launch platforms were built. Not flashy, not loud, just there, waiting. Earth's leaders knew they couldn't win a war of numbers. The Conquered had thousands of ships. Earth had a few dozen, most of them slow chemical-fueled vessels meant for mining or research. But they didn't need to win a ship-to-ship fight. They just needed to make invasion impossible. And kinetic weapons, simple, brutal, physics-based, were perfect for that. Meanwhile, out in the galaxy, the story of Earth kept twisting. What had started as a defensive strike was now painted as proof of human aggression. They don't negotiate, diplomats from older species claimed. They erase. The fact that Earth had sent peace messages after the Vorn attack was ignored. The fact that no human ship had ever fired on another civilization first? Forgotten. Even the Concorde's own science vessel incident, when a probe strayed too close to Jupiter and got disabled by an automated defense system, was used against them. The ship hadn't been destroyed, just knocked out of commission by a non-lethal kinetic nudge meant to warn, not kill. But in the retelling, it became another unprovoked attack. Fear-bred exaggeration. Exaggeration-bred policy. The Conquered voted unanimously to keep Earth isolated. Let them learn humility, one delegate said. Or let them destroy themselves. But Earth wasn't destroying itself. It was adapting. People started calling it the quiet build. No grand announcements. No victory parades. Just steady work. A welder on Luna fixed a railgun housing. A programmer in Mumbai refined targeting algorithms using only Earth-based telescopes. A teacher in Nairobi explained to her students how a chunk of metal, moving fast enough, could stop a warship without firing a single laser. And through it all, Earth kept reaching out. Not with weapons, but with words. They broadcast open messages on every frequency they could. Music, poetry, scientific data, even live feeds of sunrises over the Pacific. We are not your enemy, the messages said over and over. We only want to be seen as we are. But the galaxy wasn't listening, or didn't want to. The Vorn, meanwhile, saw opportunity. Humiliated by their defeat, they'd spent years rebuilding. And now, with the Conquered's cold shoulder toward Earth, they smelled weakness, not in Earth, but in the galaxy's unity. They began making secret deals, promising territory, offering resources, spreading rumors that Earth was planning to strike first, that their railguns were aimed at peaceful worlds. Some believed them, others didn't care. They just wanted Earth gone. Back on the home planet, people felt the shift in the air, not through official channels, but through the quiet tension in newsrooms, the extra drills in orbital stations, the way parents held their kids a little tighter at night. Everyone knew the calm wouldn't last. The blockade wasn't peace, it was a pause, and pauses always end. What no one outside Earth understood was this: humanity wasn't waiting to be saved. They weren't hoping for mercy. They'd accepted a hard truth, that in a vast, indifferent universe, safety wasn't given. It was earned. And if earning it meant turning asteroids into weapons and silence into strategy, so be it. There were no villains in this story, not on Earth at least. Just ordinary people doing what they thought was right. A technician checking power levels before bed. A student designing a better heat shield for railgun slugs. A grandmother telling her grandchild, "We didn't start this, but we'll finish it if we have to." And all the while, the platforms waited. Silent. Cold. Ready. The galaxy thought Earth was alone. But Earth knew something they didn't. Sometimes being alone makes you stronger. Because when no one's coming to help, you learn to stand on your own. The Concorde kept watching from a distance, convinced Earth was a ticking bomb. The Vorn sharpened their claws, dreaming of revenge. And Earth? Earth just kept building. Not for war, but for the chance to never have to use what they'd built. Yet deep down, everyone knew that chance was running out. Because silence, when stretched too far, doesn't stay peaceful. It becomes the calm before the storm. And this storm wouldn't come with warning shots or declarations. It would come with a streak of metal, faster than thought, crossing the void like a judgment from the stars. The galaxy had called humans primitive. Soon, they'd learn what primitives could do when cornered. And this time there would be no reports to file, no rumors to dismiss, just consequences. The end didn't come with a declaration. No grand speech from an alien emperor. No countdown broadcast across the stars. It came quietly, like a shadow passing over the sun, and then all at once like a storm no one saw building. The Vorn returned. Not with a few ships this time, but with an armada, 12,000 warships painted in dark alloys that drank the starlight. They came not just for revenge, but for glory. They'd convinced half the galaxy that Earth was a threat that needed to be erased, for the good of all. And the conquered, still smarting from their own embarrassment, stayed silent. Let the Vorn handle it, they thought. Let them teach the primitives a lesson. What they didn't know, what no one outside Earth could possibly understand, was that humanity had spent the years of isolation not just surviving, but preparing. Not for conquest, not for empire, but for this exact moment, the moment someone decided they were weak enough to crush. As the Vorn fleet crossed the orbit of Pluto, their commanders laughed over comms. They still use chemical rockets, one said. Their biggest ship couldn't scratch our hull. They expected resistance, maybe a few outdated missiles, a desperate last stand near Mars. They never imagined what waited in the dark, because Earth didn't fight like other civilizations. They didn't rely on shields or energy weapons or fancy tactics. They relied on something older, simpler, and far more terrifying: physics. The first strike came from the asteroid belt. Not from a ship, not from a base, from a chunk of rock, hollowed out and lined with magnetic rails disguised as space debris. A tungsten slug no bigger than a tree trunk shot out at nearly 4% the speed of light. It hit the Vorn flagship before their sensors could even register movement. 1 second, the command deck was alive with orders. The next, it was gone, vaporized in a flash hotter than the sun's surface. Then came the second. And the third, from Mercury's night side, from the ice caves of Europa, from platforms buried in the rings of Saturn, railgun batteries fired in perfect silence. No explosions, no fire, just metal meeting metal at impossible speeds. Entire squadrons vanished before they could fire a single shot. Shields meant nothing. Armor meant less. In the vacuum of space, there's no cushion, no mercy. Just raw energy released in an instant. The Vorn panicked. Orders clashed. Ships collided, trying to evade threats they couldn't see. Their plasma cannons fired into empty space, lighting up the void like fireworks with no audience. But the slugs kept coming, relentless, precise. unstoppable. Within an hour, more than half the armada was gone. Not damaged, not disabled, but erased. Reduced to expanding clouds of hot gas and molten fragments. The rest broke formation, scrambling to retreat. But escape was impossible. Earth's network had calculated every possible exit vector. Every path led to another Railguns line of fire. Back on Earth, there were no cheers. No celebrations. People watched the feeds in silence. Engineers, teachers, farmers, children, all seeing the same thing. Their home, defended not by gods or magic, but by the quiet work of ordinary hands. The welder who sealed the launch tube. The programmer who fine-tuned the targeting. The student who once asked, "Can a rock really stop a warship?" And now knew the answer. The Concorde watched too. From safe distances, through long-range telescopes and trembling sensors, they saw what they'd refused to believe. Humanity hadn't built a fleet. They'd turned the solar system itself into a weapon. And they'd done it without hatred, only necessity. When the last Vorn ship vanished in a silent flash near Neptune, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of realization. The galaxy had made a mistake. A huge one. They'd looked at Earth's messy broadcasts, their slow ships, their arguments over borders and beliefs, and assumed weakness. They forgot that survival doesn't require grace. It only requires will. And humans had plenty of that. In the days that followed, Earth didn't gloat. They sent a single message across all frequencies, clear, calm, and open. We never wanted this. But we will not be erased. If you seek peace, we are ready to talk. If you seek war, you now know the cost. This time the galaxy listened. The Concorde didn't send warships. They sent envoys. Not to demand surrender, but to ask questions. How did you do it? Why didn't you show this power sooner? What do you want? Earth's answer was simple. We want to be left in peace. But peace must be earned, not given out of pity, but respected out of understanding. Slowly, carefully, a new kind of dialogue began. Not as teacher and student, but as equals, however uneasy that equality might be. Trade routes reopened. Data streams flowed again. Earth still didn't have warp drives or energy shields, but now, no one called them primitive. Because the galaxy finally understood. You don't need to bend space to be powerful. Sometimes all you need is a piece of metal, a strong magnet, and the courage to use it when everything else fails. And humanity? They didn't dismantle the railgun network. They didn't hide it again. They left it as it was, silent, watching, ready. Not as a threat, but as a reminder. A reminder that the universe doesn't care how advanced you are. It only cares whether you're willing to defend what's yours. The age of being overlooked was over. The era of kinetic deterrence had begun. Not with a bang, but with a lesson the galaxy would never forget. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the solar system, a tungsten slug sat in its cradle, cold and still, waiting, not for war, but for the day it would never have to fly again.